Let me ask you a simple question. What is the main objective of Call of Duty? You run around and you shoot people, right? You'd think the most popular shooter in the world would have more depth and variety in its gameplay, but it doesn't. The gameplay is so simple that my grandma could pick up the controller and probably get top of the fucking leaderboard no problem. I can definitely see someone in the comment section typing like, oh, but what about the objective-based game modes that isn't just about killing people? If you're playing an objective-based game mode but there's no one at the opposite team guarding the objective or fighting you for it, the gameplay would just be you walking around the map taking the objective with no opposition. At that point, you might as well just go outside and play fucking hopscotch. If you're not killing people, there's really no point in playing the game at all. Your value in-game is based on the amount of kills you get. And sure, you might have a little bit of value as a teammate in Call of Duty if you can take an objective, but if you can't defend it, then you're practically worthless to your teammates anyways. Now, obviously, this isn't a diss against Call of Duty. The gameplay loop is fun regardless of its repetitive nature and is ultimately saved by its precise gunplay. This goes without saying, but I have to mention it regardless. Yes, I know, obviously, every game would be boring if there's no opposition to go against the player, so you could argue the point I made is invalid, except that was never my argument to begin with. My argument is that violence in almost all shooters is always necessary to achieve the goal, or in a lot of cases is the goal. Killing other players is always necessary and is what dictates your value as a player, which is why KDs exist. Alright, but why the fuck do you keep talking about Call of Duty? Why don't you talk about a real man's game like Honestly, when it comes down to it, Halo isn't too different. Just slap on some gravity shenanigans, throw some cool alien vehicles and weapons, and boom, it's a Halo game. Okay, but what was the point of talking about all of this? I thought this was a video about Splatoon. Shh. We're getting there, okay? Just settle down. We're getting there, I promise. So then what do the majority of the popular shooters have in common in terms of the main motif or objective of the game? You run around the map shooting people and compete for the most kills. It's the most straightforward gameplay loop you'll see out of all of these, and probably the one you'll see most often. Number 2, you and your team compete against a different team to fight over different types of objectives. This is what you'll commonly see in the games like Overwatch, Valorant, CSGO, just to name a few examples. And number 3, the last type of shooter we haven't really talked about yet, and it's the Battle Royale. You're dropped in an arena, forced to defend yourself in a game with over 100 unique players, all fighting for their survival. And yes, I'm definitely aware there's plenty of shooters that mix up the formula, adding in variables of different character abilities and teamwork, but something that we can all agree on is that violence in most, if not all of these shooters, are necessary to win, and the objective revolves around killing others, and your value is most likely based on how many kills you can rack up before the game is over. Now picture this for just a moment. The year is 2014, and someone tells me that they can see into the future, and they also tell me that one of Nintendo's most popular and profitable IPs in the next few years was going to be a shooter. I probably would have called them an idiot and asked you who you are and what the fuck you're doing in my house. And then I probably would have proceeded to hop on Smash 4 and pick Little Mac on For Glory because I thought he was the best character. If only I knew. Now, fast forward to May 28th, 2015, and all of that happened. I honestly wasn't super convinced that Splatoon was going to be as big as it is now, but when the game first came out, I had played it once and thought it was kind of cool, but I didn't really think it was anything too special, but I respected the fan base the game was garnering. But it wasn't until one very special announcement that Splatoon solidified itself, not only in Nintendo history, but in gaming history, as one of the most unique and interesting takes on the shooter genre ever created. This moment right here really stuck out to me as a moment where Splatoon left its mark on the gaming industry in general. A spot in Smash is basically guaranteed relevance for any series that ends up being fortunate enough to land itself a fighter spot in Smash Bros. But how did we even get here? What makes Splatoon so special? Well, I'll tell you what's so special about it. because that's the point of the video. So I previously talked about earlier in the video about how the majority of shooters' objectives lie in killing or any violence being absolutely necessary in order to achieve whatever goal it is you're trying to achieve, which is again perfectly fine because that's kind of the point of the genre. But the shooter genre has kind of always had that unspoken rule and stigma to them that they're all too similar and it's just about killing people, which is an obvious oversimplification, but that's not really the point. So Nintendo takes that concept and just throws it out of the fucking window and says, hey, you know what would be a cool idea? What if we make the entire point of the game not to kill people, but to have the map itself to be the objective? Which on the surface doesn't sound too original, but of course in typical Nintendo fashion, they always have a trick up their sleeve. The aforementioned squid kids don't use typical weapons that fire normal bullets. They shoot ink that comes directly from their body. So then how do you reload a gun that doesn't fire any bullets but fires ink instead? Well, harnessing the powers of the squid gods, you can turn into a squid and swim in the ink you shoot from your guns to restore your ammo. This mechanic is fucking genius. The ink mechanic gives the game a bit of a resource management angle that doesn't interrupt the flow of the gameplay and keeps up the pace while giving the player more opportunity to use the verticality of the maps to their advantage if there's ink of the same color on the wall they want to climb. This also encourages to focus the player's efforts on shooting more of the map with their ink to cover more ground, which allows an advantage for you and your teammates in combat, but it also fills out the main objective in covering the map with more of your ink than the other teams. God damn it, puberty, why do you have to keep fucking me over? By covering the map with more of your ink, not only are you helping your teammates manage their resources, but you're also giving them a chance to use more ink, and you're also giving them a chance to use said ink for positional advantage in the battle that can potentially give your team an advantage when using the proper weapon. Alright, but riddle me this, in Call of Duty, if you get enough kills, you can just call in a nuke and fucking murk everybody, it's great. So then what about Splatoon? In Splatoon's case, there's the ink tank on your back that indicates how much ink is being replenished and flashes red when you've run out of ink, but it also flashes red when you use your special weapon, which you can get by spreading as much ink on the map as possible. And for the cherry on top, when you use your special, it refills your ink tank, so it's a constant loop of spreading ink to unlock your special that spreads more ink to cover the map and kills opponents, which helps you spread more ink. Seriously, I honestly think this is a pretty clever way of subverting the typical gameplay loop of a normal shooter. Each player's worth is no longer dictated by the amount of kills they get, but by the amount of ink they spread. But let's be real here for a minute. Have you ever heard a mainstream shooter with a better soundtrack than Splatoon's? Yeah, I didn't think so. There's just so many little sparks of brilliance that Nintendo put into this that pushes the envelope in giving the shooter genre an opportunity to see that it can be very much possible to be more creative in its presentation and changing up the formula and its core mechanics while still allowing for a high skill ceiling that's still exciting to play. For example, in literally every other shooter, what does the main lobby and menu screens look like? A list of options to click with zero flair or personality to it whatsoever. In Splatoon, you're immediately dropped into a hub world that adds to the universe that Splatoon presents us and allows us to hop into a game while still being able to customize your character. You can walk around the hub and be social with other people playing the game as well. It's pretty cool, and I imagine a lot of people have probably made a few friends from it. Dude, let's not even get into the lore of the game, which is honestly way deeper than I expected it to be.
For thousands of years, the squid humanoids known as Inklings have been at war with the Octarians. Thanks to rising sea levels, these two races became the dominant forces on Earth.
These harmless turf wars of today,
but our species couldn't adapt quickly enough and ultimately drowned beneath the rising tide.
All in all, it's just very creative in its presentation, its gameplay mechanics, and everything really. I mean, you can say what you want about the fan base of the game, but you can't deny that Splatoon is really unique in today's market, and there's really nothing like it. It's a bold and unique take on the shooter genre that we've never seen anything like it before, and to me, that's what makes it really special. Alright, you want to know the real reason it's better than the other shooters? Waifus. It's the waifus, man.